I started jogging at night last August, partly because the heat during the day in Portland was unbearable, and partly because my job at the real estate office had been wearing me down in a way I didn't even notice until my hands were trembling every time I picked up the phone. It's one of those offices with a fake brick wall and motivational posters about closing deals and drinking more coffee. My boss is this guy named Rick who chews nicotine gum so aggressively you can hear it over the copy machine. So by the time I got home every evening, my brain felt like static, and the only thing that made sense was pulling on my old Nike Pegasus, grabbing my headphones, and heading into the cool night air. I loved how empty the streets felt after 10, the glow from the windows of late-night diners, the way the traffic noise faded into this soft hum. I'd start on any Alberta, where the street art looked almost alive in the dim light, past the coffee shop that still smelled faintly burnt even hours after closing, cut through the park where the lampposts flickered like they were gasping for their last breath, and loop back past the corner store with the red neon sign buzzing like it was ready to give out. The first time I saw him, I barely noticed. Just a tall guy in a black baseball cap jogging toward me. No eye contact, no smile, just two people passing on a quiet street. The second night, though, he passed me again. Same place, same exact time down to the minute. I remember because I'd just switched my playlist and Fleetwood Mac was playing. And when it happened the third night, my stomach tightened. It's a weird thing when your brain wants to believe something is coincidence, but your body knows better. I tried brushing it off, telling myself Portland's full of runners, but after a week, I decided to mess with the routine. I turned left by the old tire shop instead of right. I cut across to MLK Boulevard and ran past a row of shuttered thrift shops. But halfway down the block, I saw him in my peripheral. Same build, same cap, running parallel on the other side of the street. The air that night was heavy and damp. I could smell rain on the asphalt. I sped up, my breath getting sharper, and when I crossed back toward my building, I looked over my shoulder and he was gone, like completely gone. No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. It rattled me enough that I told a coworker over lunch at Burgerville. She laughed and said maybe I had a secret admirer, like this was a rom-com and not real life. But the next night, I skipped my run and stayed in, curled up on the couch with takeout from Nong's Khao Man Gai. At around 11:30, I went to get the mail and froze at the sight of someone standing under the busted streetlight across from my building. The bulb was blinking on and off like a heartbeat, and in the moments of light, I saw the bill of that black cap tilted just low enough to hide his face. I stood at my mailbox pretending to fumble for the key, my pulse hammering in my ears, and when the light flickered again, he was gone, like completely gone. No footsteps, no shadow, nothing. It rattled me enough that I told a coworker over lunch at Burgerville. She laughed and said maybe I had a secret admirer, like this was a rom-com and not real life. But the next night, I skipped my run and stayed in, curled up on the couch with takeout from Nong's Khao Man Gai. At around 11:30, I went to get the mail and froze at the sight of someone standing under the busted streetlight across from my building. The bulb was blinking on and off like a heartbeat, and in the moments of light, I saw the bill of that black cap tilted just low enough to hide his face. I stood at my mailbox pretending to fumble for the key, my pulse hammering in my ears, and when the light flickered again, he was gone. I told myself maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe I was letting paranoia chew at me, but 2 nights later I went back to running, trying to reclaim that part of my routine. It was a Thursday. The air smelled like wet pine. My hoodie stuck slightly to my back with sweat. I was a block from home when I noticed he wasn't ahead or behind me, but across the street, walking this time, matching my pace exactly. When I slowed, he slowed. When I stopped, he stopped. We stood like that for maybe 15 seconds before I broke into a sprint toward my building. I didn't look back until I was on my porch, and he wasn't there. I went inside, locked every lock, turned off every light, and tried to convince myself I was safe. I was halfway through a glass of water when I heard it, a slow crunch of gravel just outside my window. I crept over, heart slamming, and through the sliver between my curtains I saw him, closer than ever, standing under my window, his head tilted just slightly up like he could see me through the dark. We stayed like that, me holding my breath, him motionless, until I blinked and the space beneath the window was empty. No footsteps, no shadow leaving, just nothing. And now every night I catch myself staring into the dark, waiting for that black cap to reappear, wondering if the next time I see him, he won't be on the sidewalk at all, but somewhere inside. We were driving through the outskirts of Albuquerque in August, my wife Tammy and I, trying to patch things up before our divorce became official. The sun was just dipping behind the mesas, casting that burnt orange glow over the highway, and honestly, it felt like the whole city was exhaling heat from the asphalt. We had been arguing all morning over dumb stuff about bills and whose turn it was to pick up groceries, and I thought a short road trip might give us a breather so we could talk without shouting. Tammy was fiddling with the GPS, trying to find some roadside attraction while I kept an eye on traffic, our old Toyota Corolla rattling like it had 1,000 stories of its own. Eventually, we realized we were starving, so we decided to pull off at the first cheap motel we saw along Route 66. It was one of those neon signs, half broken but still flickering. Something about the buzzing light and the peeling paint made me uneasy. The office smelled like stale coffee and cigarette smoke, even though the guy behind the counter, a thin man in a faded red polo, looked like he hadn't moved in hours. We asked for a room for the night and he muttered something, handed us the key with a grim look. I glanced toward the hallway and noticed the room next to ours had the door slightly ajar, and there was this overwhelming smell, like something had died, or maybe it was bleach mixed with decay. I joked to Tammy about it, but the guy at the counter suddenly stiffened when I asked about it. His eyes darted toward the door, and he said flatly, "It's not available." No explanation, just those words and a slight tremor in his jaw. We tried to brush it off, laughed it off while unpacking, but later that night it got worse. Around midnight, I woke up to see a faint red glow seeping from under that same door, just enough to cast long, sickly shadows along the carpet. Then there was the sound, muffled thumps like someone was pounding the floor from inside the room. I froze, heart hammering, nudged Tammy. She squinted in the darkness, whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded and tried to convince myself it was the old plumbing or maybe some drunk neighbor. But then came the scratching, soft at first, then louder, like nails on the wood paneling. I tiptoed toward the door and pressed my ear to it. There was breathing, slow and wet. I swear it sounded like it was coming from right beneath the door. And then a low voice muttering words I couldn't make out. I pulled back, trembling, grabbed my phone to call the front desk, but no service. I peeked out the peehole toward the office and the man was gone, the lot empty, only the neon buzzing. So I tried to sleep, curled up with Tammy, holding her close, every thump making me jump, every glow of red light slicing the darkness. I started thinking about the stories you hear in Albuquerque, the old Route 66 tales about travelers vanishing, about cheap motels hiding things behind walls. I imagined someone chained or hurt in that room. I imagined the man at the desk knew that maybe he was keeping it secret. Hours dragged by and finally we fell into a fitful sleep. Morning came, the red light gone, the smell gone, the hallway empty, the room next to us still closed, the key still in our pocket. We packed and left as fast as we could, the Corolla's engine rattling down the highway. But as we drove away, I looked back in the rearview mirror and swore I saw the red glow flash once more in the window like a warning. And ever since, I can't drive past Route 66 without imagining that room, imagining whatever was left behind, imagining that some motel secrets are meant to stay hidden. I grew up in a town most people only see when they get lost taking the back roads. A flat stretch of rural Iowa where the cornfields run right up to the sky and the air smells like diesel, hay, and sometimes that sweet rot when the silos get too full. Our house was set a quarter-mile off County Road 17, a white two-story farmhouse with peeling paint and a porch that sagged just enough to creak when you stepped on the left side. Dad's been farming corn since before I was born, and August is always the rough month. The heat hangs on you like a wet towel, and the cicadas scream loud enough to make you think your ears are ringing. That particular summer, 2011, was one of the worst. Barely any rain all July, so every stalk in the east field was tall, dry, and mean, the kind that scratches your arms if you get too close. Me and my cousin Tyler, who was staying with us after his mom took a night shift job down in Ottumwa, spent that day helping Dad finish the last section before a storm came through. He had the old John Deere 9650 STS out there humming slow because one of the belts was fraying. We had to stop every so often to clear it, and each time I'd take a drink from my faded red Casey's gas station cup, the ice long gone, just lukewarm lemon soda sloshing around. The sun was baking the dirt so bad it smelled like dust in the air. By the time the combine pulled back into the shed, it was close to 7. The light was turning gold over the tops of the stalks, that slow, sleepy time of day when you can almost believe nothing bad has ever happened in the world. I was sitting on the porch steps unlacing my work boots when Mom came out wiping her hands on her apron. She had that look that says she's trying not to worry but already is. She asked if we'd seen Duke, our old black lab. He's got a limp in his back leg and these cloudy eyes that still light up anytime someone grabs the truck keys. I told her no, last time I saw him was right after lunch when he was nosing around the side yard. She said he didn't come when she called for supper, and he never missed a meal in his life, so I figured he probably wandered out toward the east field again. Sometimes he'd follow the smell of rabbits or raccoons out there. I told Tyler to grab the big mag light from the garage and we headed out. He had on that camo Iowa Hawkeyes cap he wore everywhere, and a pair of 2 big work gloves that used to be mine. We crossed the yard, crunching through the gravel, and stepped into the path between the rows. The air was still holding on to the day's heat, but the light was draining fast, turning everything that strange blue that comes right before night really falls. The corn towers over you out there, 10 feet tall in some places, and when you walk between the rows, it's like being in a green tunnel with only a thin strip of sky overhead. The leaves are dry in August, so every brush against them makes this papery whisper sound. I kept calling, "Duke, come here, boy," and hearing nothing but the creak of the stalk swaying slightly in the warm breeze. Tyler was a few steps ahead, shining the flashlight from side to side, catching glimpses of the tassels glowing pale in the beam. Then he stopped dead and said, "Did you see that?" I walked up beside him, looking where he was pointing. A few rows over, I could see this shadow on the ground, long and thin, stretching across the dirt like the silhouette of a man, but too skinny and too long. At first I thought maybe it was the shadow of a stalk or maybe a utility pole from the road, but there was nothing out here but corn. The weird part was the way it bent around the stalks, like it wasn't being cast by anything, just laying across the earth on its own. And it was moving, slow but steady, sliding between the rows without making a sound. I told Tyler to keep walking, maybe it was our eyes playing tricks in the half-light. But a minute later, there was another one, taller, closer, and moving the same way. Only this time when I shined my light on it, it didn't break or fade like a normal shadow would. It just sort of shimmered, like heat rising off asphalt. I felt my stomach twist. We picked up the pace, trying not to run because that would make us look stupid if it turned out to be nothing. But every time I glanced down between the rows, I could see the shadows keeping pace, adjusting like they were tracking us. The air felt heavier now, like the breeze had died, and the only sound left was the dry rasp of the corn leaves brushing against each other. We turned left toward the dirt track that leads out to the gravel road, the rows closing in tight on both sides, and that's when Tyler muttered, "They're closer." And I didn't even want to look, but I did, and one of them was right there, just one row away, so dark against the pale dirt it didn't even look real. That's when we broke into a run, my boots slipping in the loose soil, my flashlight beam bouncing all over, catching flashes of the stalks whipping past. I could hear my breath loud in my ears and something else too, or maybe the lack of something. The whisper of the leaves had stopped completely, like the whole field was holding its breath. We burst out onto the gravel road, the sudden openness making me feel exposed, and spun around to look.
The fields behind us were just still under the dim moonlight, the stalks unmoving, no shadows anywhere. Duke wasn't there either, just the path we'd made, our footprints deep in the soft dirt. We searched for another half hour, calling until our voices were hoarse, but there was nothing. Finally, Mom made us come inside. The next morning, Dad took me out to check the east field. He wanted to make sure no raccoons had gotten in and damaged the crop. We walked that same path, and here's the thing. There were no paw prints anywhere. Not in the dirt, not in the soft spots near the irrigation ditch. Just our 2 sets of footprints from the night before and nothing else. We never saw Duke again, and every time I had to work that part of the field afterward, I kept my eyes straight ahead, because I swear, if I looked too long between those rows, I'd see something move where nothing should be, like the shadows were still there, waiting for someone else to follow into the corn.
I've been driving trucks for 22 years now, and I've seen just about every stretch of asphalt this country has to offer. But there's something about Route 66 that never sits right with me. Maybe it's the way the road feels older than it should, like it's holding on to the ghosts of every story that's ever happened along it. And I don't mean that as a figure of speech, I mean it in the way you can feel in your bones when the air changes. This happened about 6 summers back, mid-August, the kind of Oklahoma heat that makes the blacktop shimmer even after the sun goes down. I was hauling a half load of grain from Amarillo up towards St. Louis. Nothing unusual, just another week behind the wheel. The radio on low, CB mostly quiet except for the occasional chatter from some guy talking about traffic in Tulsa. I'd passed through the west side of the city earlier that evening, the sun setting in my mirrors, sky painted in that dusty orange and pink, and once I got clear of the main strip, I decided to stick to the old highway instead of taking I-44 the whole way. It's slower, but I've always liked the way Route 66 rolls through these little towns that feel like they've been frozen in time. Faded signs for motels that haven't seen a guest in decades, diners with hand-painted menus, gas pumps with the price still reading $1.19 a gallon. About 40 miles out, somewhere in the outskirts past Sapulpa heading northeast, I came up on this old gas station I must have passed 100 times but never really looked at. It sat about 50 feet off the road, the kind of building where the paint's long gone and the roof sagging in the middle, a couple of rusted out pumps leaning like they're too tired to stand straight. I slowed a little, just taking it in, when I saw her, a young woman standing right near the edge of the gravel drive, shoulder-length dark hair, light blue dress that looked like something from a thrift store, not in a bad way, just dated. She was waving her arms slow, not frantic, just enough to let you know she wanted me to stop. I'm not the kind of guy who passes someone stranded without at least checking, so I eased the rig onto the shoulder, put on my hazards, and climbed down. The night air hit me like stepping into a warm bath, the kind where you can't quite breathe for a second because of how thick it feels. I looked toward the station and she was still there, maybe 30 feet away, looking right at me. So I started walking across the gravel, crunch under my boots. Maybe got 5 steps when, just like that, she wasn't there anymore. No fade, no running off behind the pumps, just gone. I stopped dead, scanning the shadows around the building, thinking maybe she'd slipped inside. But there's no way she could have moved that fast without me hearing something. I walked all the way to where she'd been standing, the gravel cold and damp under my boots even though it hadn't rained in days, and there wasn't a sound except the soft ticking of my truck's engine cooling in the heat. I stood there longer than I probably should have, just trying to make sense of it, and then I noticed something else. No bugs, no crickets, nothing. The kind of silence that makes the hair stand up on your neck. I decided right there to get back in the cab and keep moving, but even as I climbed up into the driver's seat, I had that itch between my shoulder blades, like somebody was standing just behind me watching. When I hit the next town, Bristow, I think, I pulled into this little all-night diner, the Red Rooster, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like it's been on since morning,
and the waitresses call you Han without even thinking. I sat at the counter and ordered a slice of pecan pie just to shake off the weirdness. There was an old guy a couple stools down, gray beard, John Deere cap, sipping his coffee, and when I mentioned I'd stopped near that old station, his eyes cut over to me real sharp. He asked if I'd seen the girl, and when I told him about the blue dress, he just nodded like he'd been expecting my answer. Said folks around there had been telling that story for years. Some girl named Marlene who was hitchhiking back in '74, last seen near that very station. Rumor is she was hit by a drunk driver who never stopped. They say she's been seen waving down cars ever since, mostly truckers, always in August, always at night. He told me if you ever get close enough, she disappears, and if you keep driving past without stopping, sometimes you'll catch a reflection in your passenger side mirror for a few miles, until she fades. I laughed it off at the time, told myself it was just some local ghost story meant to spook outsiders. But when I climbed back into my truck that night, pie still warm in my stomach, I adjusted my mirrors out of habit, and for just a second, long enough to make my hands tighten on the wheel, I swear I saw her in the glass, not looking at me, but standing on the shoulder, waving like she was trying to catch a ride. Only thing is, I was already doing 60, and there was nothing there when I looked over my shoulder, just the empty stretch of Route 66 rolling away into the dark. I've driven that road plenty since then, but I never slow near that station anymore. Don't even glance at it if I can help it, because deep down, I'm not sure what I'd do if I saw her again. And the thing that sticks with me most isn't the way she vanished. It's that in the moment before she did, I could have sworn her mouth moved like she was saying my name, and I have no idea how she could have known it.
I grew up just outside Pittsburgh in one of those half-forgotten Pennsylvania towns where the old steel mills have been shut down for decades, but everyone still talks about them like they're just on a long break. And in the summer, there's not much to do except hang out at Sheetz, cruise down Route 51, or go to whatever county fair or carnival happens to set up shop. Most of them are small, half a dozen rides, a couple of food stands, some sketchy game booths, but they're still a big deal because it's either that or sit at home sweating through the August nights. So when me and my girlfriend Emily were driving back from a friend's place one Friday evening and saw the glow of carnival lights off in the distance, we figured we'd check it out. The air was thick and wet, the kind of humidity that sticks your shirt to your back, and the clouds were low and yellowish, holding off the rain, but making everything feel like it was under a lid. We followed the lights down a narrow two-lane road that wound past some abandoned lots and half-collapsed warehouses until we came to an open field we didn't even know was there, ringed with patchy grass and a few leaning telephone poles. And sure enough, there it was, a full carnival, lit up like the 4th of July. Ferris wheels spinning slow, game booth flashing, the smell of funnel cakes hanging in the air. We parked on the edge of the field, maybe a dozen other cars scattered around, and walked in without even thinking about tickets or an entrance gate. There wasn't one, just dirt under our feet and strings of lights overhead. Right away, something felt off, like the music from the rides was too quiet, like someone had turned the volume down halfway. And the people, or at least the ones I thought were people, moved kind of strange. Not jerky exactly, just slow and deliberate, like they were going through the motions of being at a carnival. There were food stands with big painted signs, cotton candy, corn dogs, ice-cold lemonade, but the folks behind the counters didn't say a word. Not hi, not what can I get you? They just stood there, smiling faintly, eyes fixed on something over your shoulder. Emily whispered that maybe they didn't speak English, but there was no sound from them at all. No cough, no rustle of clothes, nothing. We bought a lemonade from one of them, if you can call it buying, because I put a $5 down on the counter and the guy just slid the cup toward me without looking. We walked around a while, tried the ring toss. The bottles were chipped and dusty, the rings scuffed like they'd been used for years without replacement. took a ride on the Ferris wheel that creaked and swayed like it hadn't been maintained since the 70s. From up top, I could see the whole carnival laid out, about a dozen rides, maybe 15 booths, all ringed by that same patchy grass. But beyond the edge of the lights, there was just black. No road, no buildings, not even the faint orange glow you usually see from distant streetlights, just total emptiness. And the weird thing was, when the wheel stopped to let people off, I couldn't hear any chatter from below. No laughter, no screaming from the rides, just this low hum, like an old refrigerator running in the next room. We got off and I told Emily maybe we should head back, and she agreed right away, which isn't like her because she loves this kind of thing. But as we started walking toward where we thought the parking area was, the lights around us flickered. Not all at once, more like a ripple, and for just a second the whole place went dim enough that I could see the stars overhead, and I swear the field looked bigger, like the booths and rides were farther apart than they'd been a minute ago. That's when I started feeling lightheaded, like I'd stood up too fast, and Emily grabbed my arm and said she didn't feel right either. We tried to keep walking, but the ground felt soft underfoot, like walking on a trampoline. My vision tunneled and the hum in the air got louder, almost inside my head. And the last thing I remember is turning my head toward the cotton candy stand and seeing the guy behind the counter still staring. But now his smile was gone, and his mouth was just slightly open, like he was about to say something, but never did. I woke up to sunlight burning through the windshield of my car, my neck stiff from sleeping sitting up, Emily in the passenger seat rubbing her eyes. The field around us completely empty, except for tall grass and a few beer bottles scattered near the edge. No rides, no booths, no tire tracks, nothing. But the sound of birds and the occasional car passing on the road behind the tree line. My phone said 7:42 a.m., and we had no memory of walking back to the car. Our $5 bill was gone, the lemonade cup still in the cup holder, warm and sticky. I drove us back to town in silence, neither of us knowing what to say. A couple days later, I mentioned it to a guy I know who works maintenance for the county, and he gave me this look like I'd just told him his dog could talk. He said every few years someone claims to see a carnival pop up out there for one night, never in the exact same spot, always late summer, and it's never there the next day. He laughed when I asked if he thought it was some traveling fair or something, said the county owns that land and it's been empty for decades. No power lines, no permits, no nothing. He said, if you see it again, don't go in. And I laughed like I agreed, but the truth is, part of me keeps thinking about going back just to see if the lights show up again, and if they do, whether the people behind those counters would finally speak.